The question we all want to know, what kind of money have you expected to make as an hourly rate when you sat down at a blackjack table?
The most money that I have expected to make falls between about $500 to $600 an hour.
Wow, that is... All right, guys, I have been excited to bring this to you for way too long. When I started the channel, I couldn't wait to bring you this interview, and finally it's happening. My guest today, we cannot show you his face or tell you much about him. JAFO, why don't you tell us what is going on? Why can't we see your face? Does the mob want you dead? What's the deal?
They do, actually. No. I am currently an active professional card counter. For those of you that don't know, card counting is not illegal. However, casinos are not fond of it. When they find out you're a card counter, they will remove you in a number of different ways.
Nice. All right, so tell me, how did you get started into this? How did you go from, hey, I'm a guy who doesn't know anything about cards to, okay, I'm going to figure out how to beat the casinos at blackjack?
It's kind of a weird track for me. I used to play blackjack for fun in Vegas once a year. I was never a very good player. I was a decent player. I understood the game but didn't know all the ins and outs. I actually ran into a guy at Paris telling the dealer what's up, sort of telling her what the rules were, and I was like, wow, who is this guy? But I came away from that going, I should really take the time to understand this game if I'm going to play it. Almost immediately when I started saying on Google, how do I become a better blackjack player? Up comes card counting. And I said, that's for Rain Man. That's for, that's illegal. I found the truth out, and then eventually COVID struck, and I had a lot of time on my hands. And I just started training and training and training. When COVID ended, I was in the casinos pretty hardcore at that point.
Nice. So what, you said you spent a bunch of time training. If a person was going to do what you're doing, how much time would they have to expect to put in before they can do what you can do?
A lot of people throw around the number of 200 hours of training time. I put in about probably closer to 3. It was reasonably an hour or 2 every single day from, it was about January of that year until probably about March or April when I was feeling I was pretty ready. And I still had things to learn. There's more on the other end of it that, once you get in the casino, a lot changes. But, I was confident with counting the cards, the deviations, basic strategy, my bet structure, and I was ready to go.
So how does it work? For me, I've seen the movie 21. It looks awesome. It looks like you have to be a brainiac. But what do you have to do in order to actually beat blackjack?
Well, it's not really about memory. It is not about being a genius. It is about being, I would say, disciplined, and I'm extremely tenacious. I just keep going and going, and that's what you have to be a professional. Card counting is really all you're doing is you're adding and subtracting, usually one card, but usually it's 1 or 2 cards at a time. High card is a -1, the low card is a +1, and then 7, 8, 9 in the middle are neutral. So as you're going, you're just adding and subtracting numbers, and eventually you have what's called a running count. So let's say I saw a bunch of small cards come out, and I have a running 12, and I have 6 decks remaining. Then you have to divide the number of decks remaining with your running count, and then you have your true count, which is a true 2. At that point in most games, I'd raise my bet.
Okay. And so what happens? You get rid of a bunch of little cards. How does that make it better for you? How are you going to beat the game once you get to that point?
The game has been sort of dissected over the years with computers, and they have come to the conclusion, and they actually figured this out with Edward Thorpe years and years ago. This is in the 60s. He realized that when there's an abundance of high cards, aces and tens, the player has the advantage. And that's a lot to do with primarily blackjack. Most blackjack games pay 3-2. And then so if the dealer wins with the blackjack, they just get your bet. If you win with the blackjack, you get 1.5 times your bet. So if you get, if you have $100, they'll take it away. If you win that, you get 150 as your payout.
Right.
So, and sorry, where are we going from there? I lost my.
No, it's all right.
Train of thought.
No, it's okay. So how you're going to beat the game is basically you're looking for blackjacks. You're trying to keep track of what's there and put more money out when there's a better chance of getting a blackjack.
Yeah. Okay. And then so the small cards, what happens is this is what people will know. They'll say, oh man, Dealer had a 6-up and he ended up getting like a 3 or 4 card 21.
Yeah.
That happens a lot more frequently when they have more low cards. They are required to keep hitting up till 17, and so
Right.
they're more likely to get a better hand. When there are more 10s and aces, they are also more likely to bust. So if they have a bad hand, that's when you put as much money as you can out there. If you have a double down or if you have a split,
Okay.
you want to get more money out there because they're more likely to bust in those situations when there's more high cards.
So my grandma, when I was a little kid, it seemed normal at the time, but it sounds degenerate now to think of what it was. But she used to teach me blackjack and would always say, hey, assume that face down card is a 10.
Mm-hmm.
You're also going to see that 10 be there more often when you're counting and the count is favoring you. Is that the right way to think of that? So if they have a bust card up, you can assume that they have a weaker hand.
I actually
more
call
often.
that. That's how I learned. I call it the rule of 10. That's how I learned basic strategy. Was everything you can't see, and this is not accurate. This is just kind of a glancing over. Everything you can't see, you would assume is a 10.
A 10. Okay.
So if the dealer has a 10 up, you would assume they have a 20, and then you have to play accordingly to try to beat that. And that's kind of a simple way of putting it, but yeah, it sort of helps the beginning of basic strategy. But there are some plays that are a little more complex that don't quite make sense if you just think that way. But yeah, it's kind of the idea is that not all cards hiding your 10s are actually less. If you think about it, there's only there's 2 through 9, and there's only Jack, Queen, King, 10.
Yeah,
those are your only 10. So there's not as many as people think there are.
So your average is actually lower than a 10, even though that's what.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. So you got into it. Where did you started out playing big right away? Were you playing small stakes while you learned, and then where are you at now?
Well, I did what card counters should not do. I went to Vegas with $1,000.
Okay.
That was my bankroll.
Okay.
I knew it was money I could give away if I had to.
Okay.
I said, I'm going to go for this. And if it works, great. I'll build a bankroll. If it doesn't, then I'll maybe revisit this in a couple years down the road.
Wait. So you haven't played, you've studied for a long time. You haven't played at all. And your first experiences, here we go, we're all in.
I played twice, and they were simple, short sessions.
Okay.
One was like a $30 loss. One was like a $300 loss. So I was like, okay,
so
I
you're
feel
feeling
like I'm
good?
ready. Yeah. Well, no, I thought that was just variance, which variance is the term we use regularly, which just means you're going to win and you're going to lose. How often, how frequent, it totally varies. It's just crazy. So I went to Vegas, saying I could probably lose, and I probably will lose.
Sure.
And I still haven't looked up my risk of ruin, which is probably very high for that trip. I ended up tripling my money over that trip in about 2.5 days. So I went up to about $3,000.
Wow.
When I came home, reality sunk in. I said, okay, that was a fluke. That wasn't real. I need to really dial this in. So then I got a little better, and I was grinding, probably averaging, my expected return was only about $12 to $18 an hour for a very long period of time, and I ground that bank up to about $12,000.
Wow.
From just there, and then that's when I got an investor and got the stakes up quite a bit.
So when you come back from Vegas and you've made $3,000, or you've turned it into $3,000, are in the back of your mind, are you thinking, I'm a genius, I'm unstoppable?
At first a little, yes, but then, like I said, reality sunk in. I said, no, I'm not. I knew that I was in over my head at that point.
Okay. Right on. Okay, so then you end up getting an investor, and you move from where you're playing a smaller stake to a higher stake. Is that right? Yeah,
that's when everything changed. I played for probably over a year at the lower stakes.
Okay.
Had no issues. Played every casino without any problems. Didn't make that much. Didn't have any major losses, but didn't have any major wins either.
Sure.
Then I worked with an investor and got my bankroll up to about a mid five figure bankroll, and then it was tough. Putting the big bets out there was my hands were shaking, my heart was beating.
Right.
The back offs started to come quick, and they were pretty much I had lost all of my casinos that I played out regularly within about 6 months.
Okay, so you've told me what a back off is, but to explain to everybody out there that doesn't know.
Okay. Well, back off simply is when you're counting cards, sooner or later, they will determine in a number of different ways that you are counting cards. And a lot of people think he's won a lot of money or this. No, it's actually, usually it's a surveillance thing. They'll see what you're doing. they'll think, okay, I think this guy's counting. They will run you down, meaning they'll count along with you, and they'll watch your bet structure, and they'll see. It's to somebody who is trained, it is the most obvious thing in the world who knows what they're looking at.
So they're going to get someone who's similar to a card. They have the card counting skills.
Uh-huh.
They're going to watch you play and determine, hey, this guy's counting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they'll do the same, and a lot of them have software too now, where they basically just input the information, and the software says that's a counter.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And so what happens then is the pit boss or the floor person or security will come down to you, and usually it's very nice. My personal experience, they've all been very tame. They tap you on the shoulder, or they, COVID, they don't touch you, but they they kind of lean in nicely and say, "Excuse me." Most of mine I was told I was too good to play there, which is funny. Some told me it was a business decision, and we'd like you to not play blackjack. I did have one that was, sort of aggressive. They gave me an eviction notice, but it wasn't permanent. They didn't ban me. They didn't, but they took my information down, took my license plate down. They tried to get as much information as they could from me, and really didn't want me there again. But
so if you get an eviction notice, where are you at with that casino? What do you do? Are you done?
Well,
There's no way to return?
This is where it gets into a gray area, and you got to be careful with the gray areas. This one states that I was only evicted for 14 days.
Okay.
If I am handed what's called a formal trespass. Now, the laws on this are very they're not vague, but how they're enforced is pretty vague.
Okay.
So if you go into a casino where you've been told you're trespassed, they can, according to what they say, they can legally trespass you, they can legally arrest you after you've been trespassed.
Okay.
Well, that's not exactly accurate. Legally speaking, they're supposed to ask you to leave again. They're more or less trying to threaten you to scare you to not come back.
So they give you the notice and say you're not welcome. When you come back, they have to once again ask you to leave?
Legally speaking, yes.
Okay.
Granted, that doesn't always, you can still, there are guys I've talked to that have been arrested for trespassing, all kinds of different nonsense things go on. Ultimately, me personally, I will not re-enter a casino that I have been legally handed a trespass.
Sure, that makes sense.
I won't push that past that point.
That makes sense. Okay, so you gave us an example of what could happen if it's not a good back off. You get told you're not supposed to be there, trespassed, or whatever it is. But then you were telling me on the way over here kind of a funny story where a guy came up to you, you were expecting it to go badly.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was playing, and just to look at this guy, he had kind of the hair slicked back, kind of that old school Vegas look to him.
Yeah.
And he came up to me, and I knew it was coming, but I expected him to be like, "Hey, you, get out of here, buddy." What I get from him is this: "Pardon me, sir. Can I ask you to step away from the table? Hey, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to tell you that your game is too good for us. We've been analyzing your game, and we're going to have to ask you to stop playing blackjack." And I was just taken aback, and he probably said sorry to me 10 times. And I love those moments where you just get, what you don't see coming. And it's like, okay, that's pretty funny.
Right. Did he invite you to tea afterwards?
No, but hi, I'm missing out. I should have gone to tea with him. That'd have been great.
All right, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about or have you share with us is when we met, you ended up sharing this concept with me about blackjack, and it was really helpful to me as a poker player, and that is thinking of your time at the table in terms of EV. Do you want to explain that concept and what you're doing when you're in there and how you think about your earnings and stuff?
Yeah. So every time you sit down in the casino at a blackjack table, based on the amount of money you have in your bankroll, and the game you're playing, the conditions of the game, and we can get into that if you want to, but it's just basically there's different games that have better rules and also have the way they play the game is a little different, and those variables all come together to form what is called expected value. Expected value is simply if I sit at this table for 1 hour, I would expect to make, let's say it's $200. Now here's the funny thing about that. You're not going to make $200. You're going to make $2,000. You're going to lose $500. You're never going to know where it's going to actually be. But if you were to graph that over a long period of time, you would start to see that line. There's 2 lines basically called the actual value, which is what you actually make if I won $2,000 or if I won or lost 5.
Okay.
And then the expected value, which is that $200 an hour. If that stayed constant, the AV line would do this, and eventually they would meet pretty close if you're playing a perfect game. So over the course of time, I will expect to make, with this game, I will expect to make $200 an hour.
So, and you said AV, that's the actual value, is that
That's correct.
Okay, so actual value versus expected value, and how many hours do you think you're putting in before these lines are coming together and actually looking close to what you would expect?
That also varies. It can be tough on some people because it can be hundreds of hours before they start to get, like, they'll lose for 100 hours.
Wow.
And they expect to win right away. I'm counting cards. I should be this should be my this casino's my ATM.
Right.
It doesn't work like that. I went through I think about two 70+ hour losing streaks.
Wow.
Now, people say, "Oh, I lost for a year or I lost for a month." That's not really important because I only played about 25 to 30 hours a month.
Okay.
Well, having it
But
can
that's
be
months
painful.
worth of losing.
Exactly. So for me, a 75-hour losing streak was 2 months of losing. It was painful. It was like, wow, what am I doing? Anyway.
Okay, so as a poker player, I will definitely experience, and you guys probably have experienced it, long losing sessions, lots of difficult times where you're thinking, man, this sucks. I just can't get a win. You're at the table and you're grinding, but it's just not going your way. So we've all experienced a losing session. But 70 hours, how do you stay mentally tough? What do you do to keep yourself right when you're losing like that?
Well, the biggest concept, like I said, it's believing in the math, and then the losing sometimes, to be honest, is a good thing in terms of you start looking for holes, you start looking for problems, you start questioning what you're doing, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's healthy. If you leave the session and you're dejected and you're like, man, I can't do this anymore, and if you keep saying that, you maybe shouldn't do this anymore. But it's if you have a couple of bad sessions, and like I said, if you have a 70-hour losing streak, there's a lot of money involved, and you need to start asking questions. And what I would do is, when I would have those long losing streaks, I would be practicing nonstop, constantly. Before I would spend probably 3 hours of practice for every 1 hour in the casino in those situations. Awesome. I would turn it way up because I didn't want to continue losing, but I also at the same time knew that I might continue losing, but I didn't want it to be because I wasn't playing perfectly.
You were doing something wrong.
Exactly.
Right. A great lesson. So you said trust the math. Would you call yourself a math wizard?
Possibly. No.
Okay. So this is something anyone could do? Or do you have to have do you have to be predisposed towards something, or?
I would say that you have to be, there's actually, the funny thing is all the concepts that come into this are not about math.
Okay.
It's simple math. It's been said before. It's like 5th grade math. It's like you have to be able to add and subtract.
Okay.
You have to be able to then divide. But the divisor doesn't get any higher unless you're playing an 8-deck game. That gets a little complicated. But if you're playing a 6-deck game, it's not that bad. But those aren't the concepts that are important. It's not the math that's important. It's the tenacity. It's the ability to let the losing, I wouldn't say slide off, but you take it in stride. It really affects you the right way rather than the wrong way, because it can just eat you up. And so and also there's lots of other little bits that go into this. They aren't really talked about. They are talked about, but there's no book for them. That's how to behave in a casino, how to act in front of pit bosses, how to find different games, different dealers, different things. There's also little nuance that sort of comes in as you do this.
Yeah. Okay, so another cool thing that I learned from JAFO, or have talked about with JAFO quite a bit, is Bankroll and how he thinks about his bankroll. Obviously, it's a little bit different, poker and blackjack, or card counting, however you want to say it. But there was a lot of crossover, and so I thought there was good information that I could ask. How do you think about your bankroll? How do you decide what amount to bet? How many times you can take a loss before you change things? There were all kinds of cool things you told me. So
okay. Yeah. Primarily the bankroll. Your bankroll is a tool, and if you overuse it, it'll break. It'll disappear. So the concern is you want to always protect your bankroll. That's one of the concepts about being a professional card counter. Always protect your bankroll.
And how do you do that? How do you protect it?
Well, there's lots of different ways. One of the concepts you just said, which is very important, is let's say I have a $10,000 bankroll.
Okay.
And I'm playing, and the numbers I've worked out, I have less than a 2% risk of ruin. That's a common term we use, which is risk of ruin. That simply means if I bet the same way with this $10,000, my risk of losing every dime of this $10,000 is, X percent. Usually we want it under 2%. That way that keeps you safe.
Now, is that I'm going to lose $10,000 one time when I sit down? What does that look like?
Well, that actually takes a lot longer. It typically means you're going to lose it over, however many hours.
Okay.
Well, one of the things we do to kind of combat that is if I have $10,000 and I go out, and this can happen, I go out in a session and I lose $2,000. Now, do I return to the casino the very next time and play thinking I have $10,000 when I have $8,000? Well, this is a question, and for me, no is the answer. I will not go back in saying, I'm going to play at $10,000 stakes because the variance is just part of it. The drop was expected. I'll get it back. Well, you might go through even worse variance, and then you'll blow it out.
Okay.
So what we do is, now this varies for different players, but commonly for me, I go with the $5,000 swing. When I'm playing with my investor, higher stakes, if we drop $5,000, we will then play at that new structure. So let's say I'm playing at $50,000 and I drop down to $45,000. I bet all of my bets according to a $45,000.
Okay.
Risk of ruin and all those, and the expected return. Now that brings the expected return down. You will not make as much money, but you are in a much safer place. And that's one of the concepts you have to get into your mind. It's not about the gambler idea, which is, hey, let's throw more money out there at the problem. It's like, no.
Chase it and try to get it back.
Come back to fight another day.
Right, okay. So, which I think is really good as a poker player when you're thinking, like, man, I'm getting killed and my bankroll's getting crushed. It's really easy to take that exact mentality, that gambler's mentality of like, okay, I'm just going to buy into a really big game. I'm going to win some big pots and I'll be back where I was.
Yeah.
Well, that you're actually increasing your risk of ruin at that point. So, yeah.
And that's the opposite of what you want to do. You actually want to play at lower stakes. You want to play a much safer game. It does take longer if you take a hard loss, and then you downgrade your bet structure. It's going to take you a while to come back, but you know what? You probably will come back versus losing all of it.
Right. So it's so cool. So many cool things that JAFO's told me that have translated so well into poker. And even if they were familiar concepts, just hearing them from a different perspective allowed me to kind of think through what I was doing more. So, okay, now when you got an investor, and what was it like to have someone else's money? And you said you went from your money to this larger 5-figure bankroll.
Mm-hmm.
What does that feel like to be carrying that much money and to have a huge portion of it be someone else's?
It was a little terrifying, to be honest with you.
Sure.
My investor was a fantastic guy.
Cool.
He understood counting better than most. He actually, he actually sort of dabbled in it, so he understood it better than anybody.
Okay.
And I oddly enough, I opened up with a loss almost immediately. We dropped about $1,000 the first month, and so he wasn't worried. I wasn't too worried. The following months were really good.
Cool.
Everything turned up from there.
Cool.
So it's scary, but I think there was a good thing to it. And as some other players have talked about this, they tend to play more focused with somebody else's money. If that's the kind of person you are, where like, okay, this is somebody else, I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to take really good care of this, and I'm not gonna. And I stayed in the bet structures. I never played a game I shouldn't have. I played the hours I needed to play. I did everything that I could do.
You just felt that pressure or the intensity of the situation where it was someone else's money and I got to do this right.
Well, I wouldn't call it pressure. It's kind of it's more of a responsibility.
Yeah. Okay.
This is the agreement we made, and it's it's pretty loose. We have this kind of thin contract, and he's trusted me, and I'm trusted in myself. I really wanted to make sure that I didn't violate that, because he helped me build a bankroll for me to play at a professional level on my own, and I can't thank him enough for that.
That's cool. That's really cool. So now that you're on the other side of it, though, you were able to, with him, grow your bankroll to where now you're able to take it on and still be on the professional side of things, betting larger because of that time that he invested in you, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Now I can
I
can play at a much higher level than when I started.
So tell me this, because I think this is really a valuable concept as well. A lot of us, when we're playing poker or whatever game you're involved in, it's really easy to like you were talking about, you take bad beats, or you get in a spot where you're just getting crushed, and it's really easy to give up. And something I admire about you is that you've got this fire in your belly that I think every time I catch up with you or talk to you, you're doing something new, and he's like, JAFO just doesn't go, I've had enough, or I'm going to call it. It's like, okay, if I'm messing up or if something's wrong, I want to know it, and once I know that my game is great, I'm just going to keep pushing and pushing and making sure that I produce and have a good game and stuff, which is admirable. How do you what drives you? How do you get there? What is your what's the secret sauce?
Well, duck sauce. No, I to be honest, I have a goal in mind, and this is a simple goal. Well, not simple, but it's just a singular goal, and it is I want to pay off my house. Now, cool. Does that mean I'm actually going to do that with card counting? Does it actually mean I'm going to not just keep reinvesting and diversify somewhere else? I genuinely don't know.
Sure. But
the thing is, I have sort of a monetary goal in mind, and I have to keep pushing to get there. It's not easy. I'm not gonna lie. When I talk to you, sometimes I've talked to you and things have been down. I get out of the session, and like everybody has their moments, and mine is I don't like going in and winning thousands of dollars and then giving it all back, because then I feel and this is kind of a strange way to say it, but I feel more like an actual gambler. I feel like somebody that's pressing and I just give it all back. And I know it is still gambling, but card counting is a little different in terms of, if you stick with the math, it really isn't gambling. It's more of a long-term investment. It's just you're using the casino, which is a gambling establishment, to get there.
Yeah, and I definitely have felt that, where you'll start a poker session, you'll be up, you've doubled your money, and you go way down and you're barely profitable. We call it being upstuck, where you're actually, it feels like you're losing even though you're winning.
Yes.
And it's a terrible feeling.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's easy to tilt at that point and to lose your game mentally. Do you tilt in blackjack? Is that a thing? Do you get to the point, like in poker, we'll be like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that, and it messes with your head. Do you ever feel like the game or the situation is messing with your head and you have to call it or step away? Or
it's a common thing where like I played the other night and just I could not win a hand, and it's messing with me because I'm saying my head's repeating, it's like, hey, you're a card counter, this is part of it, just keep going, keep pushing, keep going, and the hands are just coming, and I can't do anything right. Every time I split, I lose all my money. Every time the dealer has a 20 every single time.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what am I doing here? So it does start to eat away. There are times in the beginning I did walk away from positive situations, which is really a lot of guys that I talked to came down on me hard for it, because I had a session where I just kept losing, and I had a positive count, had a lot of money out there. I just couldn't lose again, and I had to step away. Now, I don't recommend that. I don't say to you, hey, when it's positive, you will lose, but you will also win. You don't know when that winning is going to start. You don't know when that losing is going to start. You just don't know.
Yeah.
But the thing is, your mental health is way more important than dollars. So
yeah, true.
Finding the biggest, and here's the secret sauce: find the balance, find your balance, find where, because can you count for, should you, like guys I talk to, should you be counting for 8 hours straight? Probably not. It's probably not a good idea. Can guys do it? Oh yeah, I talk to guys all the time that count, full time, 10 hours a day. I'm like, oh boy.
Yeah.
I do it for about 3. It's fatiguing. I don't like being in casinos very long. It's
Sure.
tough. So I have to kind of draw it back that way. That's the part that really kind of, I more preemptively say, I don't want to get this to eat away at me. I need to get out of here. So I try to keep my sessions to 2 to 3 hours at the most.
And you set your parameters that this is how I'm going to play a healthy game or a quality game.
Yeah.
And cool. The question we all want to know, what kind of money have you expected to make as an hourly rate when you sat down at a blackjack table?
The most money that I have expected to make falls between about $500 to $600 an hour.
Wow. Doesn't that sound fantastic? I would love to be making that playing poker. What... Okay, so is that kind of the top? That's what the best of the best are going to make?
No, that's not. I average around $250 to $4 when I'm playing with good stakes. And some players out there, I talk to some of them. Their expected returns upwards of $1,000 an hour. Jeez. Now those games are harder to find. That's what people don't understand. They think when you have this big lump sum of money, you can go, I can just go slam it out there. You'll get stopped a lot faster. But if you're smart and you find your games, there are guys that are pushing, $1,000 an hour games. They're still out there.
Jeez. That sounds okay. Compared to what I'm making in my life, $1,000 an hour sounds reasonable. I'd be happy to make that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's wild. So then give me your biggest win. What was the best session you ever had?
The best session I ever had, and this is odd because it was very short, but I do tend to try to get out because I think big wins really raise a lot of eyebrows. It was $5,500 in about 20 minutes.
Wow. What did that feel like?
It was scary. I felt like everyone was watching me, not the casino personnel. This is a strange place. There's some strange jokers running around here. And
okay.
They're looking over my shoulder, and there is just stacks of purples. And there's a sea of purples in front of me, and I'm just like, I don't know what's going on.
Wow.
And I pick up the money and shove it in my pocket, and I'm walking around, and my head starts spinning, and I call my wife, and I'm like, and there's no one following me.
Sure.
I'm just freaked out. First time I
Right.
ever had a big win. The casino didn't even bat an eye at me that time. They didn't think anything of it. Like,
but you're telling your wife over the phone.
Yeah.
The casino wants me dead.
Yes. I'm like, there's a guy following me in the bathroom. I gotta go home.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so that's Cloud 9, whatever, the absolute best it's been. What's the worst? What's the nastiest you felt walking away from the table?
This is going to sound terribly OCD of me. My worst loss was $6,392.
Ooh, wow. The detail.
Yes.
The detail.
And I know which casino it was, and I know what was going on.
Wow.
This was when I really pushed the stakes. So this was intentional, not the loss, just the expected return was very intentional. The count got ridiculously high. Now, here's a problem that people don't understand. Here's how variance works. When the count's really high, you have an advantage. I had about a 52.5% advantage over the house. The problem is variance gets you in the form of you don't get those good cards. The dealer does. It just happens that way. I had a sky-high count. So I'm putting out, at this time my rounds were 2x500, so it's $1,000 a round.
Wow.
And I just got obliterated. I just kept losing. And so it could have been, if you think about the numbers, it could have been a lot worse. Like 6,000 is actually pretty minor. That's only losing, 6 rounds over that. But it just was brutal. I just could not win.
Wow. That's a lot of money to drop all at once.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, that doesn't feel good.
Didn't feel good.
Does the so when that's happening, does the casino just relax? They don't worry about you anymore?
No, actually, I tend to get. I had another fairly sizable loss. It was about $3,500, and that's when I actually got my back off from that casino, and that was the aggressive back off.
Well, you were losing.
Yeah, that happens more than you think. People think, oh, I want a lot of money. I'm going to get... No, they come after you when you get backed off. And the reason being is I was just hemorrhaging chips. They were coming out of everywhere. I had a stock of their purple chips. So they keep coming out of my pockets just over and over and over again. They're like, what's going on with this guy? I had one hand that split 3 times, and I doubled over here and doubled over here. And the other hand, I was just like, I had $1,000 on the hands in one round. And it's just like I think they genuinely noticed that I was just forking over money. And they're like, what's the matter with this guy? Granted, they like a problem gambler.
Right,
But at the same time, they got to look at him, hey, if he's comfortable with this.
Where's all this money coming from?
Yeah, where's it all coming from? What's he doing? And what's,
Being a blackjack player or a professional card counter, what has been your favorite part of the experience or the lifestyle or whatever?
In the beginning, it was a lot of fun. It really was. Now, I'm not saying it's not fun anymore, but it does kind of turn into a job.
Sure.
It was exciting. It was interesting. It was, hey, we can, there's this big casino. They make millions of dollars a year. I can take some of that. I can do it legitimately. It really appealed to me in terms of that people, it's not even a gray area. The idea of counting cards is not illegal. They can't make it illegal. Casinos have tried. They can't do it. It's basically just playing a game to the absolute best of your ability. I love that. I love that you go in there and it's like, and I get it. It sounds like we described the losses. It sounds like, oh man, you can really lose a lot. But yeah, you can also really win a lot.
Yeah.
But the real truth is over the course of just, you watch your graph climb. It's like any investment you make that's really working. It's like you look at it And I've even stepped back from it because there's peaks and valleys all over it. Some of those valleys, man, oh boy, they hurt.
Yeah.
But when I look back on the whole thing, I'm like, wow, I really accomplished something. I really did, and I learned something. I went from beginning to end. Well, end is probably a terrible way to describe it. I went from beginning to at least beyond the development stage. Yeah, more of I'm ready to go. But there's always more to learn. That's the thing, is there's a lot of different angles to go into. There are different skills for card counters and advantage players. But it really, I don't know, it really appealed to me, being able to beat the casino, and then now it's like it is a bit of a grind. It is tough, but it's like it's still working. Yeah. And I know that if I just keep at it and keep practicing, I will keep. The money will keep coming. It just takes time.
How much did you feel like James Bond, or when you're in there and the casino doesn't want you doing it, but you're doing it anyway, and you're kind of outsmarting them or outwitting them? What does that feel like?
I don't know. It's a little nerve-wracking at first, to be honest, because first few times you go in there, the whole mental state is you get in there and you're like, they know what I'm doing. Everyone knows what I'm doing.
Just paranoid.
And you start shaking, and the first time you raise your bet, they're going to know why I raised my bet. They're going to know exactly why I raised my bet. They could. The guy is looking at his cell phone. He's on the other. They don't care.
Sure.
You really have to be, making a dent for them to notice you. But you get so nervous about it.
Yeah.
And then it's, there are moments where you feel cool, and you have to take those little moments. Like I had, it's a funny story. I'm playing in a casino, and me and two other guys, and I raise my bet when the count goes up. I win both hands, and the count drops quite a bit. Like, it was a bunch of tens came out.
Yeah.
Bet goes back down. Couple rounds go by, and the low cards count skyrockets back up. Well, I raise my bet again, and this is not an exaggeration. My two hands, guy next to me with two hands, and a guy in the end with one. Ace, face, face, ace, face. Dealer down card. Face to a blackjack. Face to a 20. Face to a 20.
Jeez.
10 to a blackjack.
Wow.
Face to a 20. Dealer has a face up. And the guy at the end of the table just does this move. What? I don't. You raised your bet. And I'm in my head going, can you just kind of be quiet, please?
Yeah.
Shh. So it's little moments like that, little things I've seen, and people, when it actually works, and they see it working, it's kind of hilarious. It's people are like, wow, you're amazing, and I'm like, I'm only amazing in that little moment.
Yeah.
It is pretty amazing.
Do you ever find people are watching behind you when you're putting big bets out, and they want to see what you're doing?
Yeah. I had a guy the other night that was asking me how I was betting and why I was betting the way I was betting, and and I it's tough because I talked about this. You can't tell them the truth. You can't tell them, hey man, I'm a professional blackjack player.
Right.
I know exactly what I'm doing.
Right.
And people will ask me what move to make and this and that, and I'm just like, well, here's what you should do, but don't listen to me because here I am. But I would make exactly that move.
Yeah.
I would do it 100 times over. Will I lose it? Yes. I win it probably 60 times out of 40 times. From 100, yes.
But you can't tell them why.
Exactly.
Why you know that.
And so it's tough because you can't really be known at the casino. And that's why it's tough because I think for you guys, everybody might get to know that you're a great poker player, and that's probably a good thing. Well, it might be a bad thing. You might lose some value there.
No, yeah, but the casino doesn't care that I show up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They see me, they find out who I am, and it's like it's over for the casino.
Right.
I got to find a new casino. So.
Yeah. So you've traveled a little bit to play cards. Do you have a particular place that you've enjoyed the most, or a room that was really good, a casino that was really fun to play at, or?
Yeah, I'm not supposed to name places, but I played in
areas.
I played in a casino in New Mexico. That was a really, really fun game. Really, and I say this carefully, but I don't know what the truth is. Seemingly clueless personnel. I'm out there just hammering away at them. They're just like, hi, how you doing? Smiling, everything's fine. It was a good game. And I've played some places that I'd rather not go back to ever again.
Sure.
In the same state, just a terrible casino that the instant I changed my bet, they were Larry, Curly, and Mo were dancing around, bumping each other behind the desk, and the phone's going off, and they're running around, and one of them's literally staring at me and pointing, and I'm like, okay, can I just go, please?
Being nice and subtle about it.
Yeah, they're not. some pit personnel are like you are literally looking at James Bond. They might glance at you and they look down. They're not looking at you at all. The other ones are like they're on the phone and they're looking. They can't look away from you, and then they point and they see you looking, and then they go, oh, okay, and they look right back at you again. You're like, what are you doing?
Oh man. So do you, if you're playing and you start to see those things happening behind the dealer, does it make you nervous? I mean, do you leave if they're calling and pointing at you? Does that mean it's about to be over and you need to leave?
That's a great question. You definitely know that's a loaded question when we talked about, but
sure.
You have to develop sort of a feel for that. That's definitely a skill that comes with time. It's what we call heat.
Okay.
And guys will talk about, I was getting a lot of heat, so I had to get out of there. Okay, well, did you leave in a positive count? That's a bad idea.
Mm.
You want to, if at the very least, if you're getting heat and you're feeling it, you want to finish the shoe. Will you get backed off? Probably. Could you win a lot of money? Yeah, I had a friend that I talked to that told me he was playing not very high stakes, and he won $22,000 in a single six-deck shoe.
Whoa.
In one shoe.
Deal?
One shoe.
Oh, my goodness.
He played head-to-head, but he won. So you can't know what's going to happen.
Wow.
So would you give up, $5,000 or more of AV, not knowing if you think,
for the potential,
if you think they're watching you?
Wow.
And the truth is, the people that are really watching you, the good ones, you'll never know it. It's surveillance. The good surveillance operators, you just don't know they're there because obviously they're in the camera room, they're watching you.
Okay.
And people do talk about different ideas about cover plays and things like that. And this is where I agree with the blackjack apprenticeship concept, which is...
Well, what is a cover play?
Cover play is like, let's say you... I don't know. One of the joke ones when the count is really, really, really negative or low, and you have a 12 against a 6. Some guys will double that hand. And anybody that knows blackjack, that's the dumbest play ever, because if you get a 10, you bust. You never, ever double on a hand you might bust on. You want to have the advantage. Well, They'll do that, and counters might do it because they might think there may be a less likelihood of a 10 coming out, so they might do it as sort of a cover play, but also, hey, I might even win this.
So that surveillance is going to watch you make a dumb play and say, "Oh, this guy's an idiot."
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's kind of, and there's lots of different things. There's cover betting where you change your bets. They'll bet a lot when they shouldn't, and there is a cost associated with that, but you can still win. It's more of on the gambling side of it. I don't like those plays. I don't like betting too much when I shouldn't be for cover, because the reality is everybody who is doing this is going to get caught sooner or later.
Sure.
How much are you costing yourself by trying to hide?
Right, not making the money now.
Yeah.
And potentially getting caught anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you use cover plays ever?
Very little. What I typically use as cover is as a good act. I act either a little drunk or a little stupid.
Okay.
Comes pretty natural to me, though. But I'll tip, and there's a big argument back and forth. You should never tip, and this and that. I always grew up, like when I was in college, I delivered pizzas and worked as a busboy, and I've worked so many jobs with tipping. I just don't mind it. I understand there's a cost, I understand, but I don't tip a lot.
Yeah.
I never tip away my EV. Now that's important. People understand. Like if your EV is only $18 an hour. Mm-hmm. And you're tipping $20 an hour, guess what? You're in the negative. You can't do that. And so even with a big win, it's like, and so the problem is, this has been said over and over, dealers expect a little more. So I use it as more, this sounds terrible, but I use it as more of a cover play in front of pit bosses. I will sling out a tip right in front of a pit boss.
I see.
I'll open a shoe with tips, out there and things like that. And that's about the extent of my cover. I used to use kind of a ramp up, like a slow ramp betting process where I would not go for the jugular right away. I'd sort of work my way up.
Okay.
And then I look like I'm sort of parlaying myself. Like I would have a small stack, and then if I was winning, I wouldn't bet quite enough. To it. And then once I had a giant stack out there, I'd go, okay. And then if the count goes up, I'm going to go for it, and I'd start tying the big bets out there.
I see. Okay.
The problem with that is you might get the good variance on that first shoe, and you're skipping out on that. And you might get the bad variance on that later shoe and just get crushed.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's always good to just kind of have that same structure for every, the numbers need to match all the way through.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, so for maybe there's some people watching right now that are more ambitious than me that think, hey, I want to take on not just poker, but I want to try blackjack as well, or whatever. Maybe you don't have any skills at all, and you're thinking, hey, I wouldn't mind making, what did you say, 500 an hour?
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds pretty good. Where should somebody start if they actually wanted to take that on?
Now, it's going to sound like a commercial, but I do strongly recommend Blackjack Apprenticeship. The reason why I recommend that, first and foremost, there's a lot of bad information out there. There's a lot of bad, let's say, experts on different forums, you know, and you know, you told me stories about guys telling you stuff about it. You know, we talked about it, and they said they thought they sounded like they were talking about it, and I was like, no, they don't.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of bad information out there. The best resource and the best training anywhere is Blackjack Apprenticeship. There's actually quite a few players that have trained solely on his website. They have training tools, videos.
And that's where you did all your
that's where
training?
I like I said, I had a very limited knowledge about blackjack before I started. The very first place I started was Blackjack Apprenticeship. I don't have any bad habits to break. Okay. I learned everything I could possibly learn from them, and I have read lots of other resources since, but like I said, I started with them, and that's where I got, 99% of what I've been doing out there.
So if you were brand new and they wanted, go visit that site, and they'll teach you the skills to...
Yeah, they can take you from the very beginning. There's videos that even teach you how to play blackjack if you don't know how to play blackjack.
Okay.
Teach you the basics of the game, basics accounting, playing deviations, how to control your your bankroll, different considerations, things like that. They do offer some other. They offer like a class. It's called a boot camp. It's a weekend where they really get at you. If you guys do take that, I do recommend taking it after you've been out there playing. You get more out of it.
So this is an in-person thing that you do once you feel like you're good at the game, or you're decent, or
there are different levels. People go in sort of new, but I felt like where I was already a practicing card counter. I was out there making money.
Okay.
I felt like I got more out of it than the next guy because he didn't know as much as I did.
Sure.
Not like I'm better than him, but he
wasn't as far along.
Yeah, and he couldn't absorb because there was a lot of information that came at us. It was like, oh my gosh. And I got dealt to by one of the the best blackjack players I've ever met in my life. He's an amazing blackjack player, and it's like, it's so there's a lot of information there. But yeah, just the website. Some of the players that are out there that I've talked to haven't even gone to the boot camp. Just the website and just learn all the information, and they've been out there crushing it.
Wow, that's cool. So, how much of your time would you say you spent in like books or like what do you do to train? You watch videos, but then how do you acquire these skills? What's the process?
So there's a couple different ways. You want to break them apart and focus on each individual skill. And so we'll talk about those. The beginning is what's called basic strategy. That is the foundation for everything you're going to do in all of card counting. Basic strategy is here is the right play for every single situation. Unlike poker, where you can say, okay, I'm going after equity here. I can kind of do this, but this is a good hand. There's like your consideration is, hey, is this guy an aggressive player? Is he kind of doesn't happen in blackjack. There's
a right and a wrong
literally
in blackjack.
Exactly.
Okay.
You'll have a 16 against a 10. There's a play for that. You'll have a soft 17 against a 5. There's a play for that. It's all predetermined. Once you learn that, then it's time to go on to counting. And the counting is actually, everybody thinks that's going to be the hard part. That's actually, basic strategy is a little tougher because you got to memorize all those different plays.
And counting so the basic strategy, you're memorizing. You were talking about the computers have solved this game. You're memorizing every correct play for every single combination possible.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Well, there's only 2 cards, and
sure.
There you go.
Sure. Okay.
2 cards against the 1. So yeah.
So then the counting portion.
Yeah, and the counting portion, which I said is very simple. I used a couple different methods. I used basically flipping through a deck.
Okay.
They say if you can do it, I think it's under 20 seconds, which means you have a 52 card deck, and you flip them over, and you're just doing it like that. You should be able to do it in under 20 seconds. I can usually do it good without a mistake in about 12 to 16, somewhere in that range.
Wow. So what are you counting? You're flipping through.
Yeah, what you do is this: you take out like 4 or 5 cards, or whatever. Take out some cards, put them face down on the table.
Okay.
and then you're counting, and what you're doing is you're doing the +1, -1, and then neutral cards. So like as you're going, okay, a 10 is a -1, then I have another 10, and that's -2, another 10, that's -3, and then I have a 2 and a 2, so it's back to -1. Those are both +1.
Okay.
So you're keeping up the count, and so at the end of it, if you have like 3 cards at random, 3 or 4 cards, then you say, okay, I have a +2. Those cards should be 2 high cards and 1 neutral card. They should match, so everything goes back to 0.
Gotcha.
If you have a full deck of 52, it should go right back to 0.
Gotcha.
Okay. There is also an app. It is quite literally called Card Counter, and that's on. I don't have an iPhone, but I know it was on Google Play Store. I use that. What's that?
Is this just like a digital version of what you were just saying, where the deck?
What it does is and it's really a great app because it starts off very slow and very simple, and then it works its way up. And I've played for a couple of years now. I still can't beat the highest level. It's so fast.
Oh wow!
But it really teaches you to look at the cards, and it also teaches you. There's an important concept they don't really say is canceling. So if I'm counting cards rather quickly, and this is one of the things about the movie 21 that's hilarious because he's counting one at a time in his head. They don't do that. If you have 2 cards come out, you have a couple different possibilities there. If it's 2 10s, well, that's a -2, not a -1 and a -1. And you think, well, what's the difference? Well, when you're counting over and over again and you're using a lot of brain power and you're saying those things in your head over and over and over again, it is much easier to skim over the table. And let's say you have a king and a 2.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's 0. That's neutral because they cancel each other out, so you can just skip over.
High and a low. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
That little concept helps you so much because when you're counting for hours on end, or counting 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, you use up a lot of brain power. It's like it really starts to wear you out.
So instead of, let's say you're counting and your count is a 5, instead of going 6 5, you would just say 5 and skip over the high and the low together.
Exactly. Don't got to go back and forth.
Okay. Okay. So then you figured out every correct play.
Yeah.
You figure out how to count.
Yep.
And is that it? Are you ready? Or
well, then there's well, you're sort of ready at that point. That is the basis for everything. If you can do those 2 things. Now here's the important thing. This is where bankroll management comes in, and this is where deviations come in. Now deviations are kind of funny because they add about 20%, I think, overall. I probably had the numbers wrong there, but.
And what is a deviation?
A deviation is a different play, deviating from basic strategy, that is based on the count. So let's say a common one that people hear about, and they think it's kind of a funny play, is splitting 10s. So if I have a pair of 10s, and actually it's 10 value, it can be a queen and a jack, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
When I have a pair of 10 value cards against a dealer 6, so if I have a true count of a 4 and above, I should split those.
And you always hear that that's a stupid play.
It is. It is a dumb play for the most part. Basic strategy says to never split 10s. But in the case of you have a true 4 and above, it's highly likely that one of a few different things will happen. You will split. You will get an opportunity to split again because the 10s start coming out. So you get more money.
Right.
And the likelihood increases that you're going to get, aces and 10s, so 10s or 20s and 21s. And even more likely is the dealer has a 10 under that 6. They're going to flip, and they're going to pull a 10 themselves and bust.
So regardless of what you have.
Yeah, there's lots of little advantages built into that play at that higher count. So deviations are different plays. They're different from basic strategy.
Wow.
And this is where you asked me before about cover plays. I actually don't split 10s because it draws too much attention. I do give up a little EV in that way.
When the casino sees that, they recognize that as a...
They will start staring you down if they know what they're looking for. Because there's a running joke in casinos. 2 kinds of people split 10s. Morons and card counters.
Okay.
So they don't deem me as a moron. They go, this guy actually knows how to play, and he's suddenly splitting 10s.
I
Okay,
see.
he's probably a card counter.
So just when they see it, it's going to trigger the security guys to say...
It might.
Let's check if he's a moron or a card counter.
Yeah, it might. Now, granted, I talked again. When him and I talk about these things, there are no rules that are... Well, let me say that. Like there are no concepts that are always consistent. They're not there in terms of how the surveillance operates with you. I know guys that have played for hours on end at casinos and never had a problem. I know a different guy that's gone to the exact same casino, split tens once, or did one thing once, and they were out in under an hour.
Wow.
You just don't know who the operator is, the surveillance operator. You don't know who the pit personnel are. That person could be having a bad day, having a good day, doesn't care. Who knows? It doesn't. It does vary wildly from casino to casino, and even from person to person in that casino.
So back to the basics of what you need to do to learn. You need to learn every correct play. Then you learn how to count. Then you learn that there's a whole bunch of these other plays depending on when you're favored, I guess, that you would change to.
And unfavored as well.
Okay.
There are negative plays not negative plays, when negative count plays that the likelihood of a 10 coming out is a lot less and it's more favorable. So after those are done, you're ready to effectively count cards. However, this is where you have to sort of determine your fate. I am what's called a lone wolf. I do not play in a team. I play almost completely alone.
Really quick, how does a team work?
There's lots of different ways for teams to work. The two most common ways, and one of them they touched on in the movie 21, which is they have a big player or a guerrilla big player, and they have spotters. And sometimes they have controllers and different things, but for the most part, the spotter is the person that sits at a table, plays the minimum bet, counts the cards. When they get a favorable situation, they signal in the big player. Big player comes in, slams down big money, wins, and then when the count drops, he bails out.
So from that movie, I mean, I don't know this well, correct me if I'm wrong, but from that movie, basically what they did is their losses were pretty small with the spotter, right? Mm-hmm. Is that what you called it?
Yeah.
So the person at the table who's just continuing to keep track of things, and then the wins that they get from that person coming in to make the big bets just so outweigh that tiny loss that it's inconsequential.
And to be honest, the spotter might actually win a little money. It's the game is so close to breaking even anyway. I mean, it's really close, and the amount you're right. The amount is so small in comparison that it's especially with what they were doing in the movie 21. It would so grossly outweigh everything. They could be betting $100 minimum, and he's coming in by 5,000. I mean, it was just crazy. So it's not even the same, thing at all.
Okay, so we've got the basic strategy, we've got the counting, and then the different plays, the deviations, and then is that it? You put all that together at the table, you sit down, and you're ready to go, or is there anything more to know?
Yeah, the counting, I mean, obviously, that sort of includes when you're playing, you have to find out, basically, you have to find two numbers that are very important, the running count and the true count. The running count's very simple. It's just, like I said, it's the cards all come out, and we say, okay, I have 10 small cards, and I have, four 10 value cards, and then the rest are neutral, so I have a +6. And then again, if I have 6x remaining, I divide that by 6. I have a true 1.
So what does a true 1 mean?
A true 1 means that's when there are different subtle differences right here. In a true 1, most games you have the advantage at a true 1. There are a few where you do not. The house advantage is so high, and it's high. It's like 51.5% or 51% or whatever it is.
Okay.
That's really high. So yeah, at a true 1, you won't have the advantage. You have to wait until a true 2.
Okay.
But most commonly at a true 1, you start to have the advantage. You then build your structure. At that point, I raise my bet.
Okay, betting structure. Okay.
Yeah. And the most common is, you increase so many units. Now, units is kind of a weird term. I don't personally like it, but it's how they describe it. They'll say, okay, my unit is 25. So that means my minimum bet's 25, and then I'm going to go, like a 1 to 10 spread. So at the last bet, it's going to be 250. But
I see. Okay.
And then you sort of spread that across a count from a true 1 up to a true 5 or a 6, where you max out.
Okay. So you're gonna memorize everything. Then you're keeping track of the count. You decide your play if you have to change or not based off of that count, and then you look at how do you divide? What was the divider part?
The divider is, and this is a tough one. Yeah, we didn't talk about this too much. The divider is based on the number of decks that are remaining to be played.
Okay.
So you have two items on the table that are very important to you. You have the shoe, but you don't really spend much time looking at the shoe. And you have the discard tray. Now that is displayed quite prominently. And if you get good at it, you can do what's called deck estimation. You can employ that to figure out where you are. You'll have to watch, as the cards go in there, and you have to be able to look across the table and not stare at it.
Right.
You got to glance at it and say to myself, that's one deck. So now, if it's a 6-deck shoe, I would only have 5 decks remaining. So if I had just crossed over at a running 10, okay, I went from a true 1, because 10 divided by 6 is less than 2, so it's a 1. But then if I step over to a 5, 5 decks remaining, and I have a running 10, I now have a true 2.
Guys, that wraps it up. Big thanks for JAFO for being here and giving us the down low on blackjack and card counting. If you liked it, give it a like and subscribe so more people can see it. And leave your comments and questions down below. I can't answer them, but I can contact this guy and get back to you with what he has to say so that you have a better idea of how things work. And again, those resources, if you're interested, he mentioned Blackjack Apprenticeship as being a good starting point. It's not a commercial. They're not a sponsor, but Blackjack Apprenticeship, if you're out there and you want to sponsor this video, just send us a big briefcase full of money and we'll be happy to be your sponsor moving forward.
Colin's all over that.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.